They took his bat. Not after a brawl. Not after an argument that spilled out of the dugout and onto the field in the way that baseball arguments occasionally do. Not after anything that resembled the kind of confrontation that usually precedes the confiscation of a player's equipment in the middle of a Major League Baseball game. They took it after a home run. After Shohei Ohtani hit his 27th home run of the season, a ball that traveled 139 meters and landed in a place that made the stadium go silent before it went loud, two umpires walked to the plate, picked up his bat, examined it with the specific deliberateness of men executing a protocol they had been instructed to execute, and removed it from the field. The stadium did not know what to make of what it was seeing. Neither did the baseball world. Neither, for exactly 47 minutes, did MLB itself. And then the report came. And when it did not answer the question everyone was asking. It opened 10 more. The home run itself was the kind of home run that generates conversation regardless of what happens afterward. The Dodgers were tied in the 6th inning. The game had been a careful, grinding contest between two teams that understood each other well enough to make every run feel earned. Opposing pitchers had been precise. Dodgers hitters had been patient. The scoreboard had stayed level in that particular way that tells everyone watching that something is eventually going to break this open and nobody yet knows what. Then Ohtani stepped in with 1 out and nobody on. The count reached 1-1. The pitcher went with a curveball. A good one. The kind that drops out of the zone late enough that hitters who commit early miss it completely or produce weak contact that becomes an easy out. Ohtani did not commit early. He waited. Waited past the point where most hitters would have had to decide. And then he decided. The bat connected at the precise bottom of the curveball's arc, catching it at the moment of maximum vulnerability, and what followed was not a line drive or a towering fly ball but something in between. A missile with elevation. The kind of ball that outfielders track and then stop tracking because there is no purpose in tracking something that has already won. 139 meters. 181 kilometers per hour exit velocity. Home run number 27. The stadium erupted. And then the umpires walked to the plate. What happened next unfolded in real time in front of 56,000 people and millions more watching on broadcast, and yet it somehow felt like something happening behind a closed door. Something private and procedural and strange. The home plate umpire spoke briefly to the first base umpire. A short exchange. The kind that looks, from a distance, like routine communication but carries inside it something that is not routine at all. Then the home plate umpire picked up Ohtani's bat. He turned it over in his hands. Slowly. Examining the barrel. The handle. The end cap. Running his fingers along the wood grain in the specific way that umpires are trained to examine bats when they have been instructed to look for something particular. The first base umpire joined him. Together they stood at home plate, turning Ohtani's bat over between them, while Ohtani rounded the bases and the crowd celebration began to curdle into something more uncertain. By the time Ohtani reached the dugout, his bat was no longer on the field. Dave Roberts came out of the dugout immediately. Not angrily. Not with the theatrical urgency of a manager trying to protect his player from an unjust call. With the measured, purposeful pace of a man who needed information and intended to get it professionally. He spoke to the home plate umpire for approximately 90 seconds. Whatever he was told in those 90 seconds, his expression when he returned to the dugout was not reassuring to anyone watching closely. It was the expression of a man who had received an answer that produced more questions than it resolved. He sat down in the dugout. He said nothing to his coaching staff for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. The statement from MLB arrived 47 minutes after the bat was removed from the field. It was not the statement anyone expected. It was not a confirmation that the bat had been found illegal. It was not an announcement that the home run was being reviewed or reversed or placed under any kind of official scrutiny. It was something considerably more complicated than either of those things. The statement read, in the careful language that organizations use when they are navigating something sensitive, that the bat had been removed for testing pursuant to standard equipment protocols. That the testing was ongoing. That no determination had been made regarding the bat's compliance with MLB regulations. And that a full report would be issued upon completion of the evaluation. Standard equipment protocols. Those 3 words did an enormous amount of work in a very small space. Because there is nothing standard about removing a bat from the field immediately after a home run in the 6th inning of a regular season game. There is nothing standard about 2 umpires standing at home plate turning a piece of equipment over in their hands while 56,000 people watch in confused silence. Standard equipment protocols. The baseball world read those 3 words and immediately understood that something was happening that MLB was not yet prepared to fully explain. The full report dropped at 11:47 p.m. By that point, the game was over. The Dodgers had won. Ohtani had finished the night with 2 hits and the home run and the particular quiet dignity of a man who had watched his bat confiscated on national television and chosen to respond by continuing to play baseball at an elite level with a different bat. The report was detailed. Technically dense. Written in the language of materials science and equipment regulation that most people who cover baseball are not immediately equipped to parse. But the conclusion was clear enough. Ohtani's bat was legal. It met every specification required by MLB regulations. The wood density was within permitted parameters. The dimensions conformed to the rulebook. There was no foreign substance. There was no structural modification. There was nothing inside the bat that should not have been inside the bat. Shohei Ohtani's bat was completely, unambiguously, documentably legal. And that is when the real story began. Because if the bat was legal, the question was no longer about the bat. The question was about why the bat was taken in the first place. Sources inside the game began speaking carefully and without attribution in the hours after the report was released. The kind of speaking that happens when people with knowledge of a situation feel that the public version of events is incomplete and want to address that incompleteness without attaching their names to the correction. What emerged from those conversations was a picture that was more complicated than either the original confiscation or the final report suggested. The bat check had not been random. It had been requested. Not by an umpire acting on independent suspicion. Not by a league official monitoring the game from a replay center somewhere. The check had been triggered by a formal request submitted through official channels by the opposing team's organization before the 6th inning began. A request that cited, in the formal language required by MLB protocol, concerns about the unusual performance characteristics of Ohtani's recent home runs. The exit velocities. The carry distances. The specific combination of bat speed and ball flight that had been producing results that someone, somewhere, had decided warranted a closer look. When that information became public, the baseball world split in a way that baseball world split when something touches the intersection of excellence and suspicion. One side said, this is what the protocol exists for. Teams have the right to request equipment checks. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. The bat was tested and cleared and the matter is resolved. The other side said, a player hit his 27th home run and had his bat confiscated on national television because he is too good. Because the numbers he is producing are so far outside what anyone expected that someone decided they needed an explanation that wasn't just Shohei Ohtani being Shohei Ohtani. Both sides had a point. Neither side was entirely comfortable with their own point. Ohtani addressed it in the post-game with the economy of words that defines his public communication. A reporter asked him directly, how did you feel watching them take your bat? Ohtani was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone managing anger. The quiet of someone choosing precision over volume. He said, I have used legal equipment my entire career. I will continue to use legal equipment. The report confirmed what I already knew. A reporter followed up, did it bother you? Ohtani looked at the reporter. He said, what bothered me was that we were tied in the 6th inning. After the home run we were not tied anymore. That was what I was focused on. The room understood that the press conference on this subject was over. Dave Roberts was less economical. Not because he was angry. Because he had 47 minutes of waiting and a phone conversation with MLB officials and a clubhouse full of players who had watched their teammates bat examined on national television, and he had processed all of it into something that he felt needed to be said clearly. He said, "Shohei Ohtani is the best baseball player on the planet. When someone is that good, there will always be people who look for a reason. I understand that. Baseball has a history with that. What I won't accept is the idea that excellence requires an explanation beyond the person producing it." He paused. The report says the bat was legal. It was always going to say that. Because Shohei doesn't need anything other than what he already has. He looked directly at the reporters in front of him. What he has is enough to make the whole world pay attention. Last night it was enough to hit a baseball 139 meters. And apparently it was enough to make someone decide that needed investigating. The report is in. The answer is what it was always going to be. The bat was fine. It was always just him. They took his bat. They tested it. They measured it. They examined it with the full resources of a league that has every reason to get these things right. And after 47 minutes and a technically dense report released at 11:47 p.m., the conclusion was the same conclusion it has been every time someone has looked for a reason to explain Shohei Ohtani that isn't Shohei Ohtani. There is no reason. There is only him. Home run number 27. 139 meters. Legal bat. Illegal talent. And a baseball world that still doesn't know what to do with either.